morning to everyone here in Brazil, as well as good morning or good night to everyone there in China. CBMA is very happy to have all these amazing speakers taking part of this webinar, the growth of dispute board in Brazil and in China. And I hope we are going to have a very good time learning about this very important device that's to help reduce the costs of transactions here in Brazil as well as in China. And we have amazing speakers today, especially the former Chief Justice of the Brazilian Supreme Court, Minister Ellen Gracie Norflet, that accepted our invitation. I would like also to thank Augusto Barros, my Vice President at CBMA of Dispute Boards, and Camila Mendes Viana, the Vice President of Maritime Law in CBMA. Thank you also, Luiza Neves, for the organization of this amazing webinar. Luiza is also the Vice President of Chinese Affairs in CBMA, and she's the one that really took her time to organize this event and to allow us to learn a little bit more about the use of dispute board in China. Luiza, I'll pass the word for you that will moderate the discussions, the debates.
Thank you, Gustavo. It's a major pleasure to be here and to be able to organize such great event. Well, before we begin, I would like to say that unfortunately, Mr. Li Hu, Vice Chairman of CMAC and Secretary Deputy of CATEC, won't be able to attend our event because it's happening a storm in China right now, and he took shelter, so he cannot participate in the event, unfortunately. But I believe that we will have further opportunities for this encounter once again. So I would like to invite Camila Mendes Viana Cardoso. She is not only Vice President of CBMA's Maritime Law, but she is also President of State Bar Association Coordination of Brazil and China Relations. So please, Camila.
Thank you very much, Luiza. It's a pleasure to be here and also to be able to be with Minister Ellen Grace, and also our president of CBMA, Gustavo Schmidt, and Augusto. Thank you for this invitation. As Gustavo said, I am a vice president of the Maritime and Port Committee of CBMA. So we are very close to the disputes, resolutions, and also arbitration of the Chamber. But I'm also president of the Rio de Janeiro Bar Association Coordination of Brazil and China Relations. This is a bar association where the lawyers and also the industry participation take place to discuss about Chinese matters in Brazil. And we have been learning a lot about China law, about how the Chinese investments are happening in Brazil. And as part of this coordination, we have many representatives of the Chinese companies in Brazil. So we have the CCC representative, we have Sinopec, we have China Three Gorges, Bocon, State Grid, Fundação Getúlio Vargas, which is a university where you study about China specifically, because they have a China group team just studying statistics and all the development between China and Brazil. We have also a representative of the Brazil-China Business Council, which has been developing many statistics that we will share with you a little bit here today. The Chamber of Commerce is also present in our coordination. So the idea is to have a place where we can discuss and maybe bring some different in terms of growing the relationship between Brazil and China. I would like to share with you in this introduction just some numbers in order to show how important is China to Brazil and how fortunate we are to have you, China, as our partner. The total bilateral trade, sum of exports and imports, reached last year $101 billion. This year, until August, we have reached 93.8 billion, which means 34.7% more than the same period last year. So we are growing the bilateral trade immensely in a year that, you know, we are still having the COVID, all the impacts, and that shows that the fact that we are developing the bilateral trade, probably we will have more disputes and also arbitration. Until 2020, Brazil received 47% of the Chinese investments in Latin America. So from the whole continent, we represent basically half of it. This shows the importance of Brazil and China. Nowadays, if you look the scenario of investments in Brazil, we have about 48% of the stock value in between 2007 and 2020 is directly related to electricity sector. And probably Luiza is able to say a lot about these investments because she works at State Grid. And the two main companies is exactly State Grid and China Three Gorges that have been making heavy investments in Brazil. The second participation would be oil and gas that represents 28%. Also, mining is a very important sector because, as probably all of you knows, Brazil exports a lot of iron ore to China, is one of our main exportations. And so you have also a representative of 7% of Chinese investments in Brazil in mining. Then comes infrastructure, agriculture, and also banking. In terms of agriculture, which is 3%, we believe there is a possibility of a great increase for the future. The same with infrastructure, because Brazil infrastructure needs a lot of assistance in terms of investment. It's also interesting to note that the Chinese investment in projects in Brazil is reflected in 23 states of Brazil. And Brazil, as probably most of you know, we have 27 federate units. So the China investment is all over the country. But 70% of the value of these investments is usually via merger and acquisitions, although in the recent years has been increasing the greenfield types of investments. We have today 16 central Chinese state-owned companies in Brazil making direct investment. And we know there are many opportunities for innovation on the bilateral agenda that could benefit not only China, but also Brazil. China's development in the new frontiers of technology is something that it's in our everyday life. We have to decide in the next years how Brazil is going to develop if we are going to the digital economy, Internet of Things, 5G networks, smart. So we see that there will be a lot of investment in related to the technology. And China, as one of the leaders in technology nowadays, can assist our country to develop. Of course, the experience of China also with civil construction, industrial projects, and financial support, considering the huge number of banks and investments all over the world, would also assist us. So I wanted in this introduction, this short introduction, just to share with you the potential investments and development of projects. And when you talk to projects and when you are in the middle of a project, what cannot happen is to have a discussion that goes to the Brazilian courts. If you go to the Brazilian courts, it will take, unfortunately, many years to have a final decision. And probably this would jeopardize any project. So if you are going to invest in Brazil, if you are in the middle of a project, you need to have tools to allow you to continue your project despite some kind of discussions or disputes. And that's why we consider this webinar today very important, to show you this alternative for your projects. And thank you very much. That's more or less what I wanted to tell you. We have a short time, so I try to be very concise in my explanation. Thank you very much. And I pass the word to Luiza so she can invite the remaining speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Camila. Thank you for your share with us. It's true, China is our biggest partner since 2012, and we need to not only understand how they think, but we need to jointly think of ways to better do business in Brazil and in China together. So it is very important to analyze arbitration, to understand better about dispute board, and that's the main goal of this webinar today. So to explain first the biggest question that everyone has, what's the difference between arbitration and dispute board? I'm going to invite Mr. Augusto Barros. He is the Vice President of Dispute Board at CBMA and also Director of Latin America of Dispute Resolution Board Foundation. Please, Augusto.
Thank you, Luiza. Dear colleagues, good morning. It's pity that Mr. Chang could not participate today and present his view in the growth of the dispute boards between Brazil and China. As Camila said, business with China are growing in Brazil, and China is real very enthusiastic user of dispute boards around the world. Yeah, I believe that before we present the difference between arbitration and mediation, Luiza, if you allows me, I believe that we could speak a bit about the development of the dispute boards, how we paved the way to present it to those that are following us in this morning, so they can understand how we reached that beautiful moment in Brazil. It's worth to mention that the growth of the dispute boards in Brazil is the result of a group work of many hands that have been paved this way during the last 10 years, favored, of course, by the discussions faced by arbitration and mediation. Arbitration during the last 20-something years, mediation a bit less, but the discussions are similar. As we are talking about ADRs, alternative disputes resolution techniques and methods. The use of standing dispute boards in Brazil started with the contract of the yellow line for the São Paulo subway, and it's truly the great milestone of use that and has introduced the team in our country that attracted great professionals to the discussions, in the very beginning, mostly from the lawyer side, those who are really into ADRs, especially in arbitration, and our fellow engineers and architects and the technicians that work with infrastructure projects. It's important to mention that this use in the yellow line of the São Paulo subway that happened due to the fact that late in the 90s, the World Bank started to require the use of dispute board in their contracts, which shows not just the support and the confidence of the institution in the method, but it was crucial for its expansion, not just in Latin America, but all in the underdeveloped world. They had lots of projects. And in Brazil, those discussions have been strongly favored after the decision of the Rio 2016 Olympic and Paralympic Games Organizing Committee to use dispute boards on its dispute prevention and resolution projects, which not only provided for the use of dispute boards in the most critical infrastructure contracts, but also consolidated our connection, the connection of Brazil with the Dispute Resolution Board Foundation for the first training workshop for members. About the Dispute Resolution Board Foundation, it was to mention that it's a non-profit institution that works to spread best practice of dispute boards around the world. And it's truly a key institution to understand its stage of development and also to be connected for the exchange of practice between dispute board professionals and those that are truly interested in the practice. And I can say that after those experience in the games that we can consider that ended in 2016, we started to have decisions in the courts. We start to really to construct the regulation of dispute boards. We start with decisions in the justice. We have also statements from the Federal Justice Council. It was a bit before 2006, that was in 2015, but it started to see the basic concepts of dispute boards. And with those basic concepts, we start to advance more. And in 2018, we have the first municipal law in São Paulo that enacted the use of dispute boards in public contracts. After that, we had two bills, one in the higher chamber and the other in the lower chamber. The law in the higher chamber in the Senate has been recently voted and joined the second bill in the lower chamber, and both are now together under the number 2421 of this year, 2021, and they are waiting to be voted. And the final approval, you can surely expect that will be the final game-changing of the history of dispute boards in our country. From the side of the public administration, we have a major advance with the approval of the new procurement law that in the section dedicated to alternative dispute resolution methods or to dispute resolution and administrative contracts provides that the public contracts may use alternative dispute resolution methods, but it finally mentions specifically dispute boards when it says can use arbitration, mediation, dispute boards, and others. for dispute resolution in public contracts. And that's very interesting too. When we check the previous laws from the last 20 years, every time the law stated that we could use alternative dispute resolution method, it started saying arbitration and other methods for 10 years. After we start to say arbitration, mediation, and other methods, and we consider that we could use dispute boards. But now finally we are specific saying dispute boards. So we have arbitration, mediation, dispute boards, and the others that are about to come. Spreading this good news to Latin America, we are making beautiful progress also in Costa Rica, that recently approved their procurement law, the national procurement law, also providing the use of dispute boards. Chile is with a beautiful private project fostering the use of dispute boards. And in Peru, very recently, a wonderful reconstruction project to rebuild infrastructure that has been destroyed by climate disasters is also being supported by standing dispute boards in very large scale, which bring professionals of all over the world, and will for sure mean a great advance in the team in Latin America. And now entering in the definitions, now the difference between dispute board and specifically arbitration and mediation. The most important thing to consider about this is that arbitration is an alternative for the local courts. So the decision of the arbitrators are final. And it doesn't happen with arbitration or with dispute boards and mediations. Dispute boards and mediation, they are in the middle of the way. They must be combined with a final decision, a final method as arbitration or state courts. And in the case of dispute boards, what happens, their structure, their mechanic is in the best, if you can say like that, in the best option, the best possibility is to use a standing dispute boards. What means that the members of dispute boards, after being chosen by the parties of the contracts, they remain available and working for the project. They doesn't work anymore to the parts that indicated them, but they work for the project, defending the contract and the project of the design of the changing of moods and scenarios of the parties, and doing so, being able to work during the whole existence of the project, they are able not just to give decisions and move the project forward, but also to prevent disputes as they keep interacting with the parties and stimulated them to find decisions, find solutions for their problems. And this is what dispute boards does. And to use dispute boards, the options to use dispute boards, in a country to be allowed to use dispute boards means a lot in terms of attracting international investments, because this is exactly the case of China. China had major infrastructure companies and almost endless cash to invest anywhere in the world, but the international investor must be confident that they can work in other countries and deliver the projects. That's what engineers and construction does. They want to deliver the project. They doesn't want to to the problems, the discussions, the problems in courts. So this way that has been paved in Brazil, and we can truly consider that we are in a very, very important, and we can say really in the moment that we will turn the key and consolidate the possibility of use the dispute boards in Brazil with confidence will mean a lot for international companies that are really used to use them to count on dispute boards anywhere in the world, and that will be able to use them not just in private projects, but also and mostly in the huge public contracts, public projects that are about to come in our country. We know that we have a delay in the development of our structure, and I'm really confident that dispute boards will mean a lot to recover the projects that had been interrupted due to discussions, and for the next that are about to come. To know that if I answered specifically about the difference, Luiza, but I give you back the word to continue our conversation. Thank you very much, Luiza.
Thank you, Augusto. Really, the dispute board development in Brazil is something extremely important for the construction contracts and for infrastructure investments in the future. So when we start thinking about dispute boards, when you start thinking about a committee, a board that will analyze and monitor the whole construction contract since the beginning, then we are going to think one step ahead. Of course, I'm not as skilled as Mr. Li Hu because he represents both CIMAC and CIETAC, but I'm going to share with you very briefly some points regarding the Chinese arbitration and dispute boards, just for the ones that are expecting Chinese law here too. Me and Camila, we jointly wrote an article called Arbitration and Dispute Board, a comparison between Brazil and China law. And this article will be published by China Law Society. So I believe they liked what they read. So I think that when we think about dispute board in China, we think about mostly conciliation. Actually, the Chinese law is mostly based on conciliation. When we think about the arbitration procedures there, they are raised, they are developed jointly, the arbitration plus the conciliation. And that is something that is written in the CIETAC regulation. So it's something very clear to them. So arbitration is not used as, how could I say, an attempt of a private lawsuit for them, but it's a way of conciliation from the beginning to its end. And the dispute board is even more that way. I mentioned an article that I read here for writing our article. It's called The Drb Landscape in China. It's written by Hongwei Zhao. And he pointed out 4 lessons learned with the dispute board in China. And the first point, before I even mention those four outlines, while the dispute board is something very recent here in Brazil, as Augusto mentioned, 2015, 2016, in China, the dispute board has been used for the past 20 years. So for us, it's something very recent. We are still crawling in our regulations and legislations, even though we had a major outbreak in 2021 with the new procurement law that finally acknowledged the dispute board as an alternative dispute resolution method. We still have a lot to develop, a lot to learn, a lot to establish, because we don't have specific rules by our federal laws regarding the dispute board. So it's something that the chambers, the arbitration chambers themselves decide how the procedure is going to happen. So the 4 points, the first one is the independence of the dispute board is very important for gaining the trust of the parties. Because if an engineer acts in favor of his employer, this impacts the conciliation. So the dispute board being a third party, independent, it will be way better for the parties to reach common reasoning. The second point, the second lesson learned is that the knowledge of the dispute board can complement the contract in large projects, and it's very common for variants and unexpected situations to happen. So when we have those unexpected situations happening, some disputes arising, the knowledge and the experience of the dispute board here comes essential for the parties to reach an accord. The third point is that the contract interpretation by the dispute board is necessary to resolve the disputes arising from divergent interpretations from the parties. So most of the, not most, but many of the disputes arising from the construction contracts come from divergent interpretations. One party understands that this should be done in a way, the other party understands the opposite. And so that they don't get along, don't fight, and then start an arbitration, the dispute board arises and says, okay, let's do this in an impartial way. Let's understand this from the point of view of an outsider. And lastly, he stated that the flexibility in the dispute board approach encourages the parties to communicate and seek an amicable solution. And this is very interesting because, and this is a little bit cultural, I guess. It's something that we also highlighted in our article. In Brazil, we tend to litigate. In China, they tend to conciliate. So we are, of course, with the advent of the 2015 Brazil Code of Civil Procedure, the conciliation has been fomented. But we are still learning how to conciliate more, aside from just filing lawsuits or filing arbitrations and letting other people decide. And that is something that we can learn with China. Try to conciliate more. And that is why it is so important to understand better the dispute board, to have its rules written by the authorities, and to think one step ahead in the future. If we are going to continue growing up our business partners with China, it is important for us to also learn how to better conciliate those projects. So I hope I represented well Mr. Li Hu when I'll send him a message after this webinar asking him if everything's okay. I hope, hopefully everything will be just fine. And I would like to invite Minister Ellen Grace, former president of Brazil's Supreme Court of Justice, to share with us some words.
Thank you so much, Luiza. It is for me a great honor to participate in this webinar. And I would like to just make some comments on what you just said about the cultural exchange between Brazil and China. Usually when we talk about relations Brazil and China, we talk about export and import of material goods. But there's also a great exchange, a great cultural exchange that is so important or even more important than goods and services. Some time ago, I wrote a small article in a collective book. I think Camila also participated This book was called Lawyers Go to the Movies. And the movie that I chose to report was a Chinese movie from a long time ago. It was a movie that was received a Golden Prize in Venice. It was called The History of Kyushu. I won't tell you the story because it would be a spoiler now, but the fact is that this film showed very clearly this cultural trend in China of conciliation. There are many, many instances, conciliatory instances before you go to court. Going to court or going to litigation is the last thing you should do. Why so? Because you don't want your opposing party to lose face. The solution should be a good one for both parties. And that is exactly what we need when we talk about commercial relations, long-term commercial relations. So we should keep an ambience or a climate of goodwill between the parties so that they can go on doing business together in a very constructive way. The Chinese people has, besides this cultural value of conciliation, they have a greater experience in dispute board than we have. And for this reason, it's very unfortunate that we couldn't count today with the presence of Mr. Li Hu, to whom we extend our best wishes for everything going all right where he is nowadays. But we had with you, Luiza, some very interesting overview of the Chinese way of ADR. So I think nowadays, Camila said it very well, Brazil and China are extending their relation, and the number of contracts that are between parties, Chinese and Brazilian parties, will lead necessarily, because this is natural, to some misunderstandings during the execution of a contract. And this will need the good and time tested methods of ADR, besides arbitration and mediation. We should invest, I think, a lot in dispute in dispute boards. Recently, you mentioned, or I think it was Augusto that mentioned that the World Bank insists and requires that all contracts have a dispute board clause. Nowadays here in Brazil, and I'm partly responsible for that because I'm a great enthusiast of dispute boards, our investment bank, BNDES, also has this requirement for its contracts, its big contracts. So I think this is the trend to be followed from now on. For my part, I think that we can fairly state that this mechanism is the most effective between all the ADRs that we have used up to now, because it prevents disputes. It not only solves disputes, it prevents disputes from arising or from getting in such a big snowball that will finally go to arbitration or to the courts. I wouldn't like to disparage the other dispute resolution approaches, but I think that the dispute resolution boards serve to complement the other the other ways of solving disputes, and they provide a unique and propitious avenue for ensuring smooth, unencumbered development of major projects that involve multiple stakeholders, including financiers, owners, contractors, and subcontractors. Nowadays, we see that China is booming with this initiative of the Silk Road, the initiative of Chairman Xi Jinping, and building all over Central Asia. I'm sure that we'll have several good examples of the establishment and the development of dispute boards in the future, because China gives us one of the most interesting examples in the use of dispute board. I'm not sure whether I say correctly the name of this dam, but I have this information that the Ertan hydroelectric project in China that was executed over a period of 9 years, and you can imagine how complex is a hydroelectric project. Over 9 years of execution, all of the 40 recommendations issued by the dispute board were complied with by the parties, culminating in a final settling of accounts a mere 6 months following the construction of the work. So this is unthinkable in a big project. You work with several contractors and subcontractors in a very complex project over 9 years, and when you finally turn the key after 6 months, you have all the accounts settled and nothing to be discussed anymore. This is one of the examples that we have from China. I would like to mention here, I had some information that by Peter Chapman, and the data is a little bit outdated. It's from 2007. Nowadays it must be much more, but it serves us for comparison. At that time, some 1,300 projects underway were monitored by a dispute board. The approximate value was $140 billion. And although, of course, there are confidentiality issues that don't allow for opening these precise information, we believe that 2,500 disputes were settled by the dispute boards. So only an insignificant minority, roughly 30 cases out of 1,300 projects, only roughly 30 cases were subsequently submitted to formal court litigation or arbitration procedures. Moreover, of these, very few resulted in a decision that was different from that indicated by the dispute board. According to a survey conducted by the Dispute Resolution Board Foundation here in Brazil, represented by Augusto, 98% of issues submitted to dispute boards for deliberation lead to a settlement on the matter under dispute. 98%. Allens and Linklater, quoting Jagadistan, reports that by dispensing with the need of formal hearings, the cost of using such a system drops to 0.5% of contract value. I think that this is a number that speaks for itself. Indeed, in view of their capacity to prevent litigation and facilitate continuity of constructive dialogue, dispute boards contribute important elements for timely and satisfactory completion of major infrastructure projects. Swift and well-informed solutions translate into considerable savings and in some circumstances make the difference between concluding work within budget and on schedule or burdensome backlogs of interminable litigation that negatively affect continuity of the operations of the companies involved. Normally, contracts that provide for establishment of a dispute board also determine mediation or arbitration as options for resolving of pending issues upon conclusion of contract execution. But the fact that the consultative panel is comprised of specialists in the respective field, and moreover, that have accompanied the work from the onset and are thus fully informed of all circumstances involved, make their recommendations, whether binding or merely temporarily so, more easily acceptable to the parties. So I'm not aware of comparable statistics here in Brazil because, as I said, we're still new in this field. However, according to Allens and Linkletter, in Australia, provision of roughly 8 to 10% of project costs is earmarked for coverage of court expenses, and of this, 50% reserved for litigation. So you see here the difference between the 0.5% and if you go to court, how much you shall pay over the contract cost. It can thus be perceived that the sums involved are by no means insignificant. Moreover, other additional factors must be considered that are harder to assess, including reputational damage, damages stemming from loss of commercial relationships, wasted executive staff time, and opportunity costs. These are hidden costs that many people don't take into consideration, but they are very important. Though the use of dispute review boards spread widely throughout the world, starting with North American experience with construction of large dams and other major water resource engineering projects, their adoption has since been extended to other fields of activity, including financial services, information technology, and concession contracts for operation and maintenance of public services with consumer rights protection. Brazil has been, as I said, a latecomer, which, in view of their proven utility and verified efficiency, the DRBs have become a standard requirement for securing of loans from the World Bank and other development agencies. And I said our bank here in Brazil, the BNDES. It is of vital importance that the members of the dispute board accompany execution of the contract from the onset of the project and remain permanently informed as to the progress of the work, regardless of whether or not disagreements are pending. Periodic inspections are among the regular attributions of dispute boards. And Augusto stressed very well that the dispute board members, they tend to remain with the project even after the completion of the work. So if it's, for instance, a concession contract, since they know the case from the very beginning, they're the most qualified people to take care of that project in its development. So I here make a quotation of an excellent article that I read here in Brazil, signed by Dr. Antônio Luiz Pereira de Souza, Director of Mediation and Arbitration Chamber of the Engineering Institute in São Paulo. He says that the formula of success for a dispute board is the following, and I quote, "The members of the dispute board have knowledge of the contract, the project and its scope, the plans, blueprints, legal, technical, and financial specifications, the physical financial schedule, the critical path, the construction sequence, and key individuals involved in the project. And it is provided by the parties with all relevant information regarding progress of the work, management reports, minutes of meetings, annotations in project records, correspondence, and other relevant documents, the facts and related circumstance." End of quote. So this is really the secret for a good functioning of the work of the dispute board. It has access to all documents related to the project and can exercise a critical view of everything that's going on. In the case of smaller projects that cannot accommodate additional costs, it is possible to provide for dispute resolution through appointment of just one specialist. Generally, however, a dispute board consists of 3 members. Construction of the Channel Tunnel between France and the United Kingdom was overseen by a dispute board with 5 members, and the dispute board for construction of the Hong Kong airport had 7 members. It is also possible to have 2 dispute boards working in tandem, one to deal with issues relating to engineering aspects, the other to address controversies stemming from financial aspects. It is also possible to have a composition that changes as the project advances through different phases: construction, operation, maintenance, indexation of tariffs, etc. In the aforementioned paper, Professor Pércio Tomás Ferreira Rosa mentions that within, and I quote, "within the scope of the Dispute Resolution Committee of the Engineering Institute, a variety of bodies exist, namely, Dispute Resolution Review Committee, Executive Dispute Resolution Committee, and Joint Dispute Resolution Committee that bear strong resemblance to dispute review boards, to dispute adjudication boards, and to combined dispute boards." This is usually the international nomenclature for these boards. Usually when forming a 3-member board, the parties each appoint 1 member, and these in turn appoint the 3rd, who serves as president. As in other private dispute resolution models, choice of members of the dispute board is of crucial importance. Trust of the parties is the key for ensuring compliance with the dispute board's recommendations. Such trust is determined by the expertise of the board's members and is largely dependent upon a perception of their independence and equidistance in relation to the parties. You said that, Luiza. It is not well seen if the engineer of the party gives an opinion, because of course he has a conflict there. So the independence of the board is absolutely key to its functioning. As in arbitration, a member appointed by one of the party is not its representative, but rather assumes a commitment to serve both sides in seeking the most adequate solution to any problem presented. Impartiality needs to be absolute, and any contact with the parties must be as a group. Through Though the proceedings should involve the least possible formality, the Dispute Resolution Board normally produces well-grounded decisions that, besides settling the problem in question, serve to guide future actions of the contract participants. They give an interpretation of the contract clause. So in the future, if another question emerged, the parties already know what the interpretation of the dispute board is and follow that interpretation. Just as a court decision has effects in society as a whole, the court decisions have an effect in society, so statements of the dispute board have an important didactic function for the parties and contribute toward the legal security of the contractual relationship. Moreover, as was aptly expressed by Dr. Antônio Luiz Pereira de Souza in the article that I mentioned before, and I quote, "The dispute board dissipates risks, stimulates investments in infrastructure and more competitive costs, keeps communications open through assertiveness without litigation that upsets the balance of business relationships," end of quote. There are thus multiple reasons for questioning why so useful an instrument has not been more widely adopted in Brazil, and we can hope that in the future, with the need that we have to put up a good net of infrastructure in this country, we will have plenty of opportunity of doing so. I would like to stress how much I was pleased to participate in this group with Camila, my good friend, with Augusto, with as well as Gustavo Schmidt, our president, and how honored I am to participate under the lead of Camila in the group of the Bar Association that is responsible for relations Brazil-China. Thank you very much.
Minister Ellen Grace, thank you for the amazing sharing with us. It was very enlightening for every single one of us, be sure of that. And we have received actually 3 questions. I'm gonna direct the first question to Mr. Augusto and the second one to Minister, all right? I believe this first question that was asked by Brenda Braga was already answered by Minister Ellen Gracie. However, we are going to acknowledge it because she was so kind to ask us a question. The question is, what is the composition of a dispute board panel? Is it multidisciplinary? So please, Augusto.
Yeah, preferably yes, because it depends the profile of the professionals, of the technical members that will work on will serve on the project, depends on the specific profile of the project. As the Minister Ellen mentioned, in very large projects, it's usual in the world to have more than 3 members. We can say that the plain vanilla of the dispute boards in an infrastructure contract will be the president, usually with a legal profile, not necessarily, but usually, and the 2 members will be engineers or architects. But in very large projects, such as the construction of the airport, and we have today, I believe that it's the largest infrastructure and the most complex project that's going through in the world. That's the construction of a nuclear reactor, a nuclear structure in the city of Cadarache in France. And they have, if I'm not wrong, 5 members of different profiles. One are infrastructure, the other is with a greatest focus on the financial side of the project. So yes, and this is one of the beauties of the dispute boards. It's flexibility, not just the procedure, but the structure. The more we use dispute boards, the more we get used to its mechanics, the more complex use we can have of them. And so, and this is amazing. This is amazing. The president of the board can structure the decision board depending on the kind of the consult of or the kind of dispute that has been submitted to them. So multidisciplinarity is for sure one of the beautiful qualities and attributes of dispute boards.
All right. Thank you, Augusto. Brenda, I hope your question has been fully answered. I believe it has. So I'm going to direct the second question to Minister Ellen Gracie. That is this question was also asked by Brenda Braga. She's very interested in the dispute board. In what stage of the dispute is the board called to act? Minister, you are on mute. Yes.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much, Brenda, and welcome to the dispute board fans. The fact is that the dispute board enters whenever it is formed. It should be formed on the writing of the contract. Preferably, it should help the contract redaction. And it will come into action whenever there is any doubt about the interpretation of the contract. Let's say, I'll give you an example. There was a delay due to heavy rain on the construction. How much rain was that? The amount of rain is enough to justify a delay of 15 days. The parties disagree among themselves, and there's a fee to pay or a penalty for the constructors. And so the dispute board that knows everything, knows the contract, is present and knows exactly how much rain fell in that specific location, will decide whether or not the penalty should be applied. And then the construction will go on. The construction will not be interrupted for a long time until an arbitration panel or the courts decide this issue. So this is the beauty, as Augusto mentioned, the beauty of dispute boards. It's a permanent presence during the execution of the contract.
Thank you, Minister. Brenda, I hope you're happy because you received very complete answers to your questions. The last question that we received is from Wallace Wu, and he asked, what are the similarities between arbitration procedures in Brazil and in China? So I'm going to ask this question, I'm going to answer this question, better saying, very quickly, because even though there are some similarities, but what it differs, we have many more differences, better saying. The arbitration law in Brazil is dated 1996, while the arbitration law in China is dated 1994. And some similarities to mention are the need of an arbitration agreement or arbitration clause, and the fact that the arbitration clause wards off the jurisdiction of the judiciary to judge the dispute. I think those are the biggest similarities that Brazilian arbitration law and the Chinese arbitration law have. If we don't have any more questions? I think not. I would like to thank all of you. Thank Minister Ellen Gracie for your very enlightening words, your brilliant speech. It was, I have no words for sure. Thank you, Mr. Augusto Barros. Thank you for your speech, for teaching us how it has been developing in Brazil, what are the biggest outbreaks here. Also, thank you, Mrs. Camila, for bringing us a business point of view, because it's also very important. We understand better the importance of dispute board when we have a business view, rather than just a litigation view. I'm sorry, Camila, please go on.
No, I would like also to thank you, Luiza, because it's very important to have this kind of events and to discuss about dispute boards, and especially the relations between China and Brazil. So I think this is a work we have been doing together, this group. On your part, was great that you were able to organize this event, and we are sorry that Mr. Lilo, who could not be present, but hope next time he will be. We have a kind of partnership between CBMA and CETAC, which is very important for us. And that's just, I wanted to thank you also for receiving us today here at CBMA. Thank you.
Thank you all. I'd like to thank you also for the people that are watching us on YouTube. Thank you for participating so actively, for the questions asked, and we hope to count on you all in our next webinar. So everyone, have a great day, a great week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.
Ciao, Camila.